Our next panel features one of the Texas Senate's leading voices on the economy and two of Texas' leading economic development experts with their thoughts on our state's economic recovery and maybe even a few predictions if their crystal balls are warmed up. This discussion is quite timely, and we want to thank Google for bringing you this part of our program. And it's my pleasure to introduce Catherine McAdin, Head of Public Policy and External Affairs South for Google. Catherine? I think you're
All right, so I'm going to play on the irony that I'm the Google person with the tech problems. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. This is an incredible organization and an even more informed and skilled panel. Senator Birdwell, Dale Kramer, Tony Bennett. Very much appreciate the opportunity. I will say I think that everyone on this call and everyone on this panel does a really, really great job. Probably too good of a job because of all of the California companies now coming. Google is not one of them. We've been here since 2007, but have flourished in the growth that you have brought. We have 1,600 employees in 4 different offices across the state, and they hire Texans, including this recovering former Republican staffer, crazy person. But since then, we're really invested and very excited to support the economic recovery. In the last year, we've seen more than our share in. We're proud to be part of the Texas economy that has recovered better than most. Since that time, Google, as you may not know, has given $20 million in free advertising grants to both the state and to nonprofits to help spread COVID awareness and recover their own businesses. We've trained more than 10,000 people in businesses and given them IT certifications and upskilling as they join the digital transformation, and given more than $1 million in direct funding and grants to small businesses around the state. Couldn't be more excited to be part of the Texas economy. Hook 'em, and thank you. Have a great panel.
Well, thank you, Catherine. We appreciate that, and thank you, Google, for your support. You know, Texas is primed for increased growth in both our population and jobs as businesses continue to make Texas home. More and more people continue to lay down roots in Texas, discussing, and per the comptroller, who we'll hear from tomorrow, a vibrant state economy was able to weather the COVID-produced recession. While devastating on many fronts, we were able to get by better than expected. Joined by Senator Brian Birdwell, Tony Bennett of the Texas Association of Manufacturers, and Dale Kramer of the Texas Taxpayers and Research Association. Senator Birdwell, Lieutenant Colonel retired Birdwell, is a native Texan, decorated military veteran, and lifelong conservative Republican, proudly representing Texas Senate District 22. He was born in Fort Worth, graduate of Lamar University in Beaumont, U.S. Army Command and General Staff College, and the University of Missouri, Kansas City, where he earned a Master's of Public Administration degree. Senator Birdwell was first elected to the Senate in June 2010 in a special election and has been reelected by his constituents 3 times. He currently serves as President Pro Tem of the Texas Senate and additionally serves as Chairman of the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and Economic Development. Tony Bennett is President of Texas Association of Manufacturers, a position he's held since 2012. And TAM's mission is to promote and protect a pro-growth business environment that ensures a strong manufacturing sector in competitive Texas. Dale Kramer has been Terra's president since September 2009, when he was promoted from his position as chief economist. Dale served as chief revenue estimator under Comptroller Bob Bullock and was budget director for Texas Governor Ann Richards, as well as deputy director under George W. Bush. Thank you all for joining us as we discuss how Texas can best take full advantage of a post-COVID economy. So first question will be for you, Senator Birdwell. Needless to say, it's been a tough 11 months and we're not out of the woods yet, but like so many times before, Texas is rallying. Will you give us your thoughts on our economic recovery, as well as your thoughts and projections on what you see as the most critical issues to be addressed by the 87th legislature?
Sure. Thank you, Justin, for the opportunity to join Tony and Dale. We spend a lot of time talking and reading much of what they produce. While we may have been going about business very slowly, I've had a lot of time to read, and so it's been good use of my time. I think that I got to hear a little bit of Governor Patrick, and I think I would want to echo his enthusiasm back early on during the beginning of the pandemic, where there's a lot of unknowns, you're in some territory we're just not, not having a clear picture of the way out of this. Originally, the comptroller told us there would be probably around a $5 billion or shortfall. And then the most recent estimate that the comptroller gave us, that Chairman Nelson's working with in finance, is actually under $1 billion. And I think the governor's right. The best way to deal with your economic challenges is to grow out of them. Now, you can't guarantee that, but I think we're already seeing that process of happening, growing out. Now, the challenge is the businesses that we have lost, and most of what I have seen within my district has been restaurants. Those are folks that are already in a pretty tight margin for profitability. And so that's been disappointing to see those folks. It doesn't make their loss easy, but I do believe that we are on the upswing out, kind of like back in 2009, 2010, last in, first out of the recession. And I think you're seeing that here. I think the best thing, and I'll use my military analogies. I love the governor using the John Wayne movies because I can tell you all those quotes too. But the best thing about Texas is we don't punish you for being successful. We don't put more rocks in your rucksack for the sake of putting the rocks in your rucksack. The difficulty is that both in your introductions and in what Governor Patrick is alluding to indirectly, is when people are moving here to Texas, what I'm seeing are individuals moving here of their own accord because of what Texas offers or what it doesn't do to the individual. Businesses that are moving here do the same thing, and I think Tony and Dale would bear this out. Businesses move here, but they may not be telling their employees why they're moving here from Chicago or other places. Thus, we've got to make sure, and while it clearly, we're going to protect First Amendment, we're not intruding on a business owner from what they say to their employees. But you better be sharing with your employees why you're moving here, because if you're coming here for the right reason, but your employees are voting for what they escaped, we're going to do to Texas what has been done to many of the other states. So I think our outlook looks very good based on what Governor Abbott has put out. I think it was just before Christmas. I think we're going to see still a very strong philosophy of governance from our leadership, both in the House and the Senate and at the statewide level, that encourages freedom, opportunity, growth, and we're not going to punish you for being successful. So the outlook I see is good. We will have our challenges. What the governor said, Lieutenant Governor said, with a 2-year budget, that's hard to predict and hard to be inside that shot group. But we're enthusiastic. I think we're with the tragic loss of life, but I think we are on the downhill slope of COVID. And I'm ready to start our engines again. That's where I'm at. So,
well, good, Chairman. Appreciate that and agree. Dale, do you have anything to add regarding the state's recovery in terms of jobs and economic growth, and how both are affected by incentives, in particular, Chapter 313 of the Texas Economic Development Act?
Yeah, thank you, Justin. I appreciate your inviting me to be a part of this. Senator, it's great to see you. Tony as well. Nice to be with friends. There's no question, and Justin, I'm going to break it into a short-term and a long-term answer, but hopefully brief regardless. But over the short term, from peak to valley, from the pandemic, we lost 1.4 million jobs in Texas. Now we're about 2/3 back. We're down about 500,000 from our peak. The good news is as the senator points out, we are coming back. By no way do I want to discount the horrendous loss of life and the suffering that folks have felt, but we're getting through this. We're in the process of coming back, and a year from now, we're going to be setting new records in the economy. I don't think there's much question about that. Unfortunately, we know some industries are suffering. Hospitality is a big part of those losses. Small business is a big part of those losses. So we need to work this session and hopefully help rebuild a foundation from which they can grow. Now, I will say over the longer haul, unfortunately, as proud as we are of Texas, and with every reason to be, we don't have a personal income tax, but that comes with a price. And the trade-off for that is we rely much more heavily on the property and sales tax to generate those revenues. And when you compare us to other states, our property taxes are among the highest in the country, about 60% higher than the average state. So if you're looking at building $1 billion auto plant like Tesla, for example, to use a recent case study, those numbers can be prohibitive. But if we use incentives judiciously, like Chapter 313, Tesla can get those property tax numbers down to where they're more competitive with other states. We're never, even with incentives, going to be a lower tax state for business than, say, Oklahoma, which Tesla was also looking at. But if we can get close enough, then those businesses are going to look at the fact we have a rational regulatory structure. We have good tort laws. We are a right to work state. Our labor laws are good. We're a great place to do business, centrally located. But taxes do create a barrier for us. But if we can get those down using temporary discounts like Chapter 313, we're going to win over other states in bringing those jobs to Texas because of all the other good parts of Texas. Now, I will say we're on the verge, hopefully, of an American renaissance in manufacturing. I think a lot of manufacturers have learned from the pandemic, from the trade wars of the last couple of years, that they need to be looking at reshoring or onshoring their supply chains in the US. So if we use those incentives judiciously, we can get a big part of that new manufacturing investment and build a much stronger foundation in Texas than what we went into the pandemic with.
Thank you, Dale. Appreciate that. And Tony, this question is for you, sort of a little bit of a follow-up, but as Dale mentioned, Texas business property tax is high and higher than California's. And please give us your perspective on the decision process for manufacturers when they're looking to expand in or move to Texas.
Well, thank you, Justin and Chairman Birdwell and Dale. Great to be with y'all. Enjoy being with you. There's intense competition for capital within any company that's trying to grow its operations. There's about a half a dozen major things that just about every manufacturing industry looks at. Those are going to start with do you have a skilled workforce? Does the community have proximity to the markets that they serve? And they could be global markets, obviously. Do they have raw materials available at an affordable cost? Do they have affordable energy costs? Do they have the necessary infrastructure to bring in the raw materials and ship out the final product? And then a reasonable tax burden. And I think that's what we're talking about today. And that tax burden thing is a challenge for Texas, particularly as we move many of our industry sectors. And TAM deals with about 24 major industry sectors, aerospace, petrochemical, all those broad sectors. All of our sectors are moving to an advanced manufacturing operation. And by that, we mean it's going to be as high tech as it possibly can be, best practices, and all of that expensive business personal property attracts a lot of tax bills with it. And so, hence we just need a Chapter 312 and Chapter 313 introductory offer rate so that we can at least bring these fantastic global multinational companies in many cases to the state. Typically when they're here, they stay here despite the property tax burden. There are other reasons to be here that are far outweigh that, but we don't want to scare them off, or we don't want to not be on the prospect list. The CEO and his siting team in the boardroom are looking at when he says, we want to grow the company. Where are we going to do it? We have $1 billion. Go forth and find us the best deal. And so that's kind of a broad look at how those decisions are made. And they want to go to a community that wants them there. And that can be expressed in many, many ways. And one way is we'll give you this introductory offer, come to our community, and let's grow together.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate that and agree. Chairman Birdwell, what with the reauthorization due for Chapter 313? Any thoughts on where we are and what your thoughts are on
Sure.
Chapter 313?
Sure. Let me give you the strategic view of how I took last session in this section. There were folks that wanted me to reauthorize both 312s and 313s in the same session. From a legislative perspective, I wanted to bifurcate to look at each individual program distinctly and separately from a legislative perspective and not entangle them together in a single legislative session. Recognizing, though, that from a local chamber of commerce perspective, 312s are a, city council, maybe the county. 313s are a school district issue. So from a local actions, local incentives, they are not commingled as chapters, but they are a complementary package together. So last session, 312s were done in reauthorizing. We're going to do 313s this go round, and I have the same thematic concern with both. And what we did with 312s last go round is we reauthorized with some transparency measures that allow the citizenry the ability to weigh in on those incentives ahead of time, rather than it being simply after an executive session and then the announcement's made, and then that's when the citizens find out about it. I want to do the same similarly with 313s, so that from a transparency perspective, there's not just a after, but there's a before, so that the voters of the school board, voters of the city council, voters of the commissioner's court can be heard with their concerns, or business owners. Now, generally 313s are not going to be businesses that are competing with mom and pop locally. That can happen, but it's generally not statistically happening from the comptroller's reports. But to make sure that local citizens have the ability to be heard, it doesn't mean I'm putting any requirements in that compel the citizens to do so. My duty is to make sure that they have the opportunity. It's up to the citizen to bear the responsibility of being heard and caring to be heard, but I'm not trying to set the results. I'm simply trying to make sure the opportunity's there, and then renew the 313s so that whether it's the Chamber of Commerce or anybody that's out looking for businesses, or, pick a Chamber of Commerce in Senate District 2 or anywhere in the state, that's coming to Tony and his organization saying, hey, whether it's small manufacturing or medium or large, we're interested. We've got these set of packages. And then it's a combat multiplier to have 312s, 313s, and the like. So I think we're going to renew it. I don't know if it'll be for 10. That's generally what we've done. We had to get the incentives or the transparency pieces in 312 to do that. If we don't get the transparency things we're looking for, I think it'll still get renewed. It just may be a shorter period to take a bite at transparency sooner than another 10 years from now. But I think that's where we're headed. That's certainly the direction I'd like to take it. And pending any guidance from the Lieutenant Governor or any things foreseen from my committee members, I think that's what we'll accomplish.
Great, good. Well, Dalen, you're welcome to add anything there, but I also want to, this is a tall order, but in a few minutes, so some of the things we hear about how the state loses revenue from these agreements, but in a few minutes, can you explain how the state doesn't lose revenue from these agreements?
Yeah.
And you're on mute. 1 second.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I appreciate that. In fact, very timely question, because just today I read an op-ed in the Statesman by a UT professor that's touting about how much money the state is losing on these deals. And So I appreciate your asking that question, because there is a misperception out there that somehow through the school finance formulas, 313 agreements cost the state. I mentioned Tesla a little earlier, so I'm going to use that as an example. Right now out in Del Valley, Texas, there are these big empty lots that there's nothing on them. There's not even much grass. Those lots are still a nice location. They're on the tax rolls at about $5 million. Now, under 313, Tesla's looking to build in Texas. The way 313 works in Del Valley is, hey, Tesla, you can build a plant and we're going to tax you on the first $80 million of that value. Temporarily, anything above that for the next 10 years, we won't tax. So what's happened is you have a couple of vacant fields that are worth $5 million. Even with the limitation in effect, Tesla is going to be paying on an $80 million value. So all of a sudden, Del Valley ISD is higher than what it was without Tesla. Now, if you know anything about school finance, the state looks at your property wealth, and the wealthy districts get less money than less wealthy districts. Well, the state's going to look at Del Valley and say, hey, you're $75 million richer now with Tesla than what you were before. You're getting roughly $1 million more property tax from that investment. So we're going to reduce our state aid to you by that $1 million you're now collecting in local property taxes so that you're equal with everybody else. So in fact, when you use a 313 to turn a vacant lot into a productive facility, you're growing your tax base even with a limitation in effect. You're wealthier, you get more property tax revenue, the state's going to take that back. And 10 years from now, when that limitation expires, all of a sudden, instead of $1 million in property taxes, Tesla will be paying $10 million in property taxes. State's going to come back and tell Del Valley, we're going to give you $9 million less now. Or you may even be wealthy enough now, we're going to start recapturing and taking money from you. So the reality is 313s actually save the state money because it brings a property taxpayer, Tesla, and brings them into our tax system where they weren't there before. And we take advantage of those additional tax dollars. So the state actually gets to spend less.
Yeah. Justin, may I add something to that?
Please.
Not that I have the intellectual rigor to add much to Dale. Okay. But there's a factoid here that's just as prescient as what Dale said. The tax reduction is only on the M&O portion of the tax bill. When the state puts money to M&O and operations, it does not go to interest and sinking costs. But when the company comes in, its reduced tax bill is only on the M&O side. So when Tesla comes in, they get no tax break on the bond issues that were voted on 10 years before they arrived. The minute they build and arrive, they're paying on that INS when they show up in that school district. And that's an additional benefit of the 313 piece of the property valuations in the 313 program. Because we do have a challenge with local debt. I'm not bragging about local debt, but the 313 helps bring another entity in to help starting to pay that down. So the tax break is not to the local costs of school on the INS, the debt side. Dale, did I say that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for reminding me about that point, Senator, because in fact, you know, Del Valley has those historical debt payments. They're fixed. All of a sudden, their tax base is a heck of a lot bigger, so they can raise the same amount of money to retire their debt at a lower tax rate. So they're actually cutting taxes for existing residents of the school district.
Yeah. If the school board's doing that, that's where your local elections come in.
Well, I will say there are some really nice high schools in some 313 districts now as a result of new building programs.
Yeah.
That is
And,
correct.
Justin, if I can jump in here, inventory taxes are also, they cannot be a part of the abatement agreement. So that tax revenue from inventory, which is raw materials, supplies, and spare parts, and they would be quite substantial at an automotive plant, that revenue flows immediately into the fuel district. So, you know, there are a lot of things that happen immediately, even throughout the abatement contract, that folks don't know that will flow into the coffers of Del Valley, which used to be a property poor district, but now has become a wealthy district.
Oh, thank you. And Tony, next question is for you, and I'd like to get to this. So we've discussed, the need for the reauthorization of 313 and potentially, any revisions, but do our competitor states have a less burdensome procedure than we do in terms of applications and applying for a 313?
Well, the short answer in many cases, yes. Back in my younger days as a corporate property tax director, I dealt with multiple states and a couple of countries here in North America, Canada and Mexico for my company. And we had a very different experience in many of those situations. Most of the states that I dealt with have one-stop shopping where everything is handled at the Secretary of Economic Development, the state's office in the state capital or somewhere central where things are carried out. And I know we want to do our program on a more local basis, and that's fine. And we're used to that here in Texas. But, the problem with, for example, 313 in Texas, it not only do you not really have a one-stop shopping situation, but you have a very onerous and complex application procedure. It's an expensive process to go through. You don't see this kind of procedure in other states. We're becoming somewhat non-competitive in this area, particularly on school tax abatements. The school tax consultants have made the process extremely expensive, very onerous, and these high fees, these hidden revenue protection formulas, and all these things that have conjured up since I did tax abatement in Texas 20 years ago have added to the cost so substantially that now we find ourselves on average a project only saving around 37% when our neighbors in Louisiana, Oklahoma, and other states are in the 75 to 100% range. And I'm not saying we need to be in that range. I'm saying we've got to be globally competitive to bring these multinational advanced manufacturing projects to Texas. And if we don't, we're going to fall off even the secret prospective list of states in that boardroom when the CEO or the CFO announces, we have $1 billion, where do we take it?
Yeah, thank you, Tony. I want to remind everyone, if you have any questions now, please go ahead and put those in the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. One question before we get to questions from the audience, and then for all of you, whoever wants to answer, or all of you, economic incentives like 313, 312 are viewed by those politically, ideological, far left, far right, sometimes as unnecessary government handouts. But how do we compete with other states if we do away with these tools? Anybody?
I'll jump in on that and let y'all follow up. I think, and Senator, I'm glad you're sitting down because this may knock you out of your chair. I half agree with those folks in that they think these incentives are an unnecessary evil. I think they're a necessary evil. I don't like incentives, but the reality is the lack of a personal income tax in Texas has created a distortion. in that our property taxes are 60% higher than the average state. So we use these incentives as a way of alleviating that distortion. Now, I'd like lower property taxes. I don't want to pay a personal income tax for that privilege, though. But with regards to handouts, it's also important to realize we're not writing a check and giving Tesla or Samsung or any of these guys. We're not handing them a check. You know, we're not giving them a handout. What we're doing is reaching our hands a little less deep into their pockets to take money from them. So we're giving them a discount on what they're going to pay to us. In the case of Samsung, Samsung's talking about building a $17 billion facility out in Manor. And with a 313, all that means is we're going to tax them like they're a $14 billion facility. I mean, it's a little bit of a discount to Samsung, but for us, it's like we've got a $14 billion entity paying us tax that we didn't have otherwise. So I'm not a fan of incentives. I'd rather argue and talk about broader aspects of tax policy. But as long as we have to live in the real world, we have to accept that this is a way we need to do business.
Yeah. Oh, looks like Tony's going to talk. I'm sorry.
No, sir, you go ahead.
Oh, no, your light was green, so I thought you know. Let me add to that here too, because I'll use my old soldierly analogies, if I may, Justin. You fight on the battlefield as it is to make it the way you wish it were, not fight on the battlefield as you wish it were, though it's not the way you wish it were. From a tax perspective, I wish all the states were low tax, and then our federal taxes were low enough to make us competitive with Ireland with a 5% business tax. I mean, but the world's not already perfect. Dale's exactly right. It's not a handout. It is saying we will take less from you than what we could upon your arrival. So it's a shock absorber that the arrival, the business's shock, so to speak, of arriving in Texas is dispersed over a 10-year period of what we don't take, and then the 25-year period of what this, and this is what the comptroller has to certify, that the 25 years of the totality of the business's presence in the state, that 10-year shock disbursement is regained over the life of the 20-year or 25 years of the not the incentive, but the contract. The comment that is made about it's a giveaway is too broadly aimed at all of the economic options that are on the table for the state. Film industry, enterprise fund. In fact, one of the first things Governor Abbott did was got rid of the what was the dealt with new technologies. I'm having a brain cramp, Justin. It was parallel to the enterprise fund, but it was like an emerging technology where the state became the primary investor on behalf of the citizens and investing into companies. And that's really not where the state ought to be. And Governor Abbott did away with that because it made us I can't remember what the word is, but we were taking the risk with taxpayer money. That's not a fair option because look, even with the enterprise fund, the difficulty is Tennessee, North Carolina, Nevada, Oklahoma, one of the, I think it was Beretta, one of the gun manufacturers just went to Arkansas, is like being at a live auction among the states using taxpayer dollars to bid. But at a regular private live auction, at some point, everybody reaches their price point and says, I'm not going to bid anymore. So you got to be careful with things that are enterprise fund or something where you're actually putting an outlay of dollars out, because the real deep problem with that is once you say it's okay to do it for the film industry, what other industries are you going to do it for? Because now you're in the equal opportunity of every industry. Whereas with 313s, the industry is choosing to come to Texas, not Texas choosing to bring the industry. So all of those economic programs shouldn't be lumped into a everything's an apple, everything's an orange basket. There are differences. And I hope I help explain some of the depth here of the difference between these things.
And Justin, let me just chime in here. What's different and magical about 312s and 313s? In many of these cases, what I call this host plant, like a Samsung or like a Toyota or like a Tesla coming to a community, well, something magical happens. Suddenly their tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers want to follow the host plant, and they come into the community or nearby, and oftentimes they don't qualify for tax abatement, or they didn't apply. They're in a hurry to start building immediately. And suddenly you get all of these satellite suppliers that go on the tax roll at full value. And this happens time and time and time again, not to mention the smaller suppliers, the trucking firms and those sorts of things that come in and start employing people. So it is a phenomenal thing to see in just a few short years, the taxable value just jumping through the roof at these taxing entities, and the tax wealth that follows a major project like what 313 attracts.
Thank you. We have a question here from one of our members, David Spencer, and please discuss section 303 and the pros and cons of government entities having an ownership position in economic development versus just abating taxes under 312 and 313. I think we, anyone have, Dale, is that something you can help with?
I'll defer to Tony on that one.
Well, it's not something that I have a lot of experience with on that. I was hoping Dale would cover.
Yeah, Chairman.
Justin, may I at least try to address it from the 30,000 foot view? Because I don't have the familiarity on 303 that I do with 312 and 313. So I can't address the tactical or even the operational, but at the strategic view, it's exactly why the Emerging Technology Fund was so fundamentally flawed, because the state was becoming your investor in a product that was being made in Texas, having an ownership position. We put a higher education institution tethered to it, and the aesthetics and the appearance of it, the state should not be your investment banker. And state ownership, because if somebody came out that we had, in fact, the last year of that program, I think was 13 was the last operational year. 14, I don't have I'm really reaching in the back of my memory, but we had 7 companies that had failed that the state had put money into. Now, there are clawbacks and some other things, but ultimately, if the state's being an investor into that, what's the state's ownership of whatever proprietary item comes out of that investment? Does the state get a share of it? So while I can't directly address 303s and the specifics of Mr. Spencer's question, that's why there's such a bifurcation between the state only owns state property, private industry owns the risk, and if you and the property and the benefit of that idea or the failure of that idea. And if you commingle them, that's where you get that phraseology. The profits are privatized and the losses are public. And that's why you do not want that commingling.
Thank you. Thank you. We have time for one more question, about 3-4 minutes. And we have 2 here, and they're sort of combined. One is there support for revising Chapter 313 to improve transparency, follow through on contract breach penalties, and also data available basically on our companies just as likely to move to Texas? Do you have any information or data on companies just as likely to move to Texas with or without a 312 or 313? Are they going to move here anyway?
I think it's important to remember that on a 313, as a part of their application, they have to demonstrate, not to the school district who has a vested interest in approving a project, but to the controller, who's an independent reviewer. The company has to demonstrate that the 313 is a determining factor in their decision to build here. So it's not for everyone. I mean, we're not going to have to use 313s to build some facilities here because of our infrastructure. We're a great location for a lot of facilities, but you know, a Tesla or a Samsung, a semiconductor manufacturing, there are a lot of alternative locations they can do business in. So we do require that they prove that they're not coming here absent the 313.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I heard that here in Austin, the former CEO of Toyota North America say that when asked about incentives, he said he could not have taken it to his board to come to Texas if there had not been an incentive on the table. It's just how the situation is works. And there were the 3 or 4 finalists they had all had different packages available, and that's just the situation that we're in. Dale, I agree with you. Sometimes you have to sort of hold your nose, but it is necessary. It is necessary evil. The game we're playing, and it's something. And it's not a game by any means. It's certainly more money for the state, and it really works out well for the districts that not only have new buildings but have additional money and funding for operations and at the schools. So, and again, it's limited. So, with that, we're at time. I really want to thank all 3 of you. Both Senator Birdwell, Tony Bennett, Dale Kramer.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
If the COVID economy has taught us anything, it's that we can't rest on our laurels, and so this kind of is very important. And so thank you so much for this conversation. Especially thanks again to Google for supporting this panel. And now we're going to take a 15-minute break, but please keep your webinar window open. You give the opportunity, you can look at our sponsors. We're going to run a playlist of our sponsors who we very much appreciate. And we'll see you back here at 3 p.m. for our last panel of today, which is Don't Mess with House Bill 3. And we have Todd Williams moderating a panel for us. So please be back with us at 3 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Have a good evening.